Great. Good, good. Well, it's great to be with you all. Thank you, Arun, for the invitation. It's lovely to meet everyone. Looking forward to a great discussion about this great book that I'm such a big fan of. In fact, I am just putting a note in the chat here. I'm friends with Maria Jadis, one of the authors, and sent her a note earlier this morning to say that I was joining this group today, and I asked her to send a greeting, and so we're joined here at least in message by Maria Jadis, one of the co-authors of the book. So wanted to share that with you all. And let me start, just share my screen here, and we'll get into it. And I appreciate the oops, I think I just stopped my share inadvertently. Can you all see that? Good. I'm getting thumbs up there. Thank you. I appreciate the introduction, Arun. You hit all the high spots there, but let me just kind of go through a few of those just to briefly kind of set the context for who I am and why some of the points of view about this book that are important to me. As Arun said, I over the last 12 to 13 years or so of my career, I've held leadership roles in 3 organizations. Arun mentioned IBM and Expedia. I also, prior to that, was the national president and board chair of an organization called AIGA, which is the Professional Association for Design in the United States. At the time, it was an organization of about 25,000 member designers around the US, located in 75 local chapters and 200 university campuses. It was a fascinating role for me, and it gave me the chance to interact with designers all over the US and to see how they were working. And it was an interesting time for design because it was 2011 to 2013. It was before, just on the cusp of, but just before the real sort of growth and scaling of design that we saw in the subsequent decade. Then, as I moved into my role at IBM, that's what I was doing. I was growing and scaling a global design program there. We added more than 3,000 practicing designers to that company in my time there. We elevated more than 30 executive design leaders into those roles and placed them around the company in those years. So some really important sort of growth and scaling was happening there. Then went on to spend a shorter time at Expedia and had a little bit of a different experience there because the company started out with a pretty substantial and important investment in design, but then did something that we're seeing a lot of companies do right now, and that is they retracted that investment and kind of closed down a lot of the operation that we were building there to scale design at that company. So there was an arc in each of these 3 roles that kind of reflected what was happening in the industry over those years. So I just want to kind of give you a little bit more context there. As Arun mentioned, I also produce and host this podcast called This is a Prototype. I'm in season 2 now, as he mentioned, about to wrap up this season. Each season is exactly 10 episodes. So I've got going on 20 episodes out there. Strongly encourage you, if you're interested in this notion of designers as change makers. That is basically at the core of what I talk about with my guests, including Jenna Date. This is the most current episode that I've got up here. Fascinating conversation, fascinating leader whose points of view and stories really resonate with the themes that we'll talk about here. in our discussion. This is the course, the leadership course that Arun mentioned, Design Leadership at Scale. I want to point it out here because if any of you are looking for advancing your career, if you're at that sort of point in your career where you need to kind of get more serious about your leadership skills, and you're interested in a course like this, I am accepting applications now for the Q4 cohort, and I have the opportunity to offer to anyone from the book club a 20% discount on the registration fee. So reach out to me if you're interested in that, and I can help you with that. But happy to be able to offer that discount. It's a really great course. Other than that, I do a lot of guest speaking, a lot of visiting different organizations, interacting with leaders of different stripes and different disciplines. I love interacting with executive leaders, especially non-designers. So I do a lot of executive briefings. I facilitate team offsite retreats and stuff like that. I also have a coaching practice where I work one-on-one with designers, mapping out their career path. So that's a little bit more about me and my what I'm up to and why I am here. And speaking of why Changemakers? Why, Arun, when you invited me to join the group, you said recommend a book and then recommend a chapter. So this is a book that has been I think it's one of the best design books of the last few years for sure. And I'm just really excited to talk about it. I'm friends with Maria Giudice, one of the co-authors, as I mentioned, and I was fortunate to be interviewed as part of their research for the book. It's a book that I reference many times in my design leadership course. So it's just loaded with great material. And one thing that I love about it is that it is focused on the idea of change and the action of change. And I think that at our core as designers, this is what we are. This is our core offering, is that we are agents of change. We are the change makers. And so it really focuses on that core principle, that core skill that we have. And I love that. And they take, Maria and Christopher really take different approaches to how really unpacking this idea of how change happens, especially in complex organizations, which is the environment that most of us are working in, these sort of complex scaled organizations. So I just think that that is an important idea, and one that really resonated with me and resonates, I think, with a lot of people that I discuss this book. That I just discussed this book with. One other thing that I love about how they approach the idea of change, and we'll talk about this as I go through some more of my thoughts about the book, is that they talk about change in some very small and subtle ways, some very nuanced ways that change is happening that aren't very obvious on the surface. And then they also talk about some really epic and ambitious ideas for change. So they're kind of, really approaching this idea of change in a very layered and textured way, which I really appreciate. So why then chapter 8, building support? Why did I choose for us to focus on this particular chapter? For me, this is the central chapter of the book. This is where everything that Maria and Christopher are discussing really intersects and comes together in, I think, a very human way. It uses an idea that has been at the core of my leadership practice for years, and that is that we need to, that when we are addressing our peers and our stakeholders in these complex organizations, we need to do so with deep empathy. We need to understand these individuals as people and approach them with that deep empathy in very much the same way that we would with the users and customers of the products and services that we are designing in our designer jobs, right? And that's an important distinction there. We need to understand, as I said, we need to understand them in the way that we would understand our users. And when we do that, something important happens. We then convert this idea of building support, we convert that into a design problem, right? We convert it from being sort of a complicated businessy type of thing that can feel very intimidating and very hard for us to engage with. We convert it then into, oh, this is basically, I'm designing an experience. This is understanding a person, understanding what drives them, what their barriers are, what they're accountable for, and designing an experience for them. I do that all the time. I'm a designer. So then we're on our home field, right? We're playing to our strengths rather than playing in this sort of foreign, intimidating, confusing business space that we don't feel very comfortable. So I think that's an important, an important thing about this chapter, and it's really the reason it really resonates with me and my point of view about how we operate in these organizations, and that's why I chose this particular chapter. As I'm going to go through, I pulled some particular quotes from the chapter that sort of illuminate different ideas here. And the first couple of quotes that I'll show, they really illustrate this notion of building support. This one, the first one I'll just read off. Both the Change Initiative and the Changemaker profits from connecting with the stakeholder, learning what motivates and incents them, and then earning their trust and respect. That's exactly what I was just describing, right? We benefit when we can approach these key individuals in our organization with that deep empathy. That sets us up then for the building of the trust and respect. Second quote here, when applied to stakeholders, it means getting to know them as people and gaining a broader perspective on how they might perceive a proposed change, right? When we can understand what those internal motivations are for that individual, then we are able to approach them in a more human way, in a more respectful way, in a way that is going to help us find each other. And that's really what this is all about. That's really what this whole chapter is about, is how can we find these key people and build a rapport and a relationship with them that is going to allow us to do our best work. However, that doesn't always happen, or it doesn't always happen easily. And I think that that Maria and Christopher also do a great job of saying, wait a second, change is hard. Change is difficult because, as they say here in this first quote, resistance to change is inherent in everyone. We are always, human nature, that we are always striving for consistency. We're always striving for normalcy. We're always striving for stability. The idea of change is contradictory to those instincts, those human instincts. So, importantly, in the second quote, we need to resist the inclination to come in too hot, trying to fix problems without the proper context or detailed understanding of stakeholders' roles and responsibilities and the culture that surrounds them, right? So we have to be very sensitive to not coming in and saying, hey, I'm a change maker, we're going to change things, get ready for it. Nobody's going to like that. Nobody's going to respond well to that. Instead, we need to work the edges. We need to get to know things. We need to do a lot of listening, and we need to understand the context in which this person or this team of people or this organization of people are working in. I'll go through a couple more quotes and ideas here, and then I'll open it up, maybe another 4 or 5 minutes, and then I'll open it up for discussion here. Another quote that I really love comes from another friend of mine who is quoted and referenced in this book a couple of times. That's Sarah Brooks, Sarah's a design strategist. She's now at Apple. She and I worked very closely together at IBM for many years. And Sarah really kind of adds some texture and perspective to this idea of how we go about actually understanding these people. She says, how do you piggyback on their existing efforts in such a way that they feel you're just helping amplify the work that they've already wanted to get done? Nobody wants someone else's idea. I don't think that's entirely true. I don't think she necessarily meant it that sharply, but nobody wants someone else's idea, is what Sarah says. Nobody wants to be told to do your thing unless it's clear that it helps with their thing. It's just human nature. Okay, so there's some subtle things that Sarah's talking about in this quote that are really important. And that is, when we understand what that person is trying to achieve, then we can say, hey, you know what? The thing that I'm trying to achieve is actually really complementary to that. We can build these together and we can have exponentially more impact, right? When you're talking about building on someone else's idea, adding to it, complementing it, then first of all, you are praising them, right? You are giving them credit for their idea, and then you're also, in a very subtle but important way, you're also advancing your own idea. And I just love that sort of that very sort of subtle twist there that Sarah is taking on. Okay, one more thing that I'll go through here that I really appreciate in this particular chapter are these couple of frameworks that Maria and Christopher put into the chapter here. The first one is this on the left, this Leapers, Bridge Builders, and Tradition Holders framework. And the second one is this SCARF model, this acronym for status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. What I like about both of these is that they become tools and canvases for us as we are mapping out our stakeholders in an organization. Who are those key people that we need to build relationships with? How do we understand them? When I say, oh, all we need to do is understand them as people, that's not an easy thing to do, right? And but these frameworks give us some ways to begin that process that are I think very simple and very easy for us to engage with. If you've done a stakeholder map of your organization, you've identified 3 people, a chief technical officer, a product leader, an HR person who you need to influence, chances are you don't know very much about them, but you can probably do a little bit of research to understand enough to place them into some of these different categories. And once you do that, you begin to understand, hey, here are some tactics for how I can approach this person that can set me up for success. And conversely, here are some ways that they're probably not going to respond well if I come in too hot, as they say, or if I just kind of trip over myself. that are laid out in these frameworks. So I really appreciate I really appreciate how these are set up here. So we're at the bottom of the hour here. I'm gonna stop my my screen share here and come back to you. And you know, just I've kind of planted some seeds and laid some ideas out there. I'm curious, you know, what you all think, what resonated with you that maybe I didn't get to, and happy to answer any questions.